Hello and welcome to the Not a Guru podcast. I'm one of your podcast hosts, Tyler Smith, certified athletic trainer, certified strength and conditioning specialist. I'm also here alongside the prestigious Dr. Heidi Cook. We are here to help you with personal development, personal growth, and really building a foundation that lasts you your whole life. We're so excited you're here today, and let's jump in.
Howdy ho.
How's it going? How are you?
It is going.
It's going. It has been a week for
It,
Heidi. I will tell you that. I don't want to speak too much to it because she will share as much as she feels comfortable, but she's had a week and a half, we'll put it that way.
I have had a week and a half. I feel like that's an understatement, but that's okay. Like everybody's okay. But it's been a week. So we procrastinated recording this episode by
We're the
about
day
five.
after Thanksgiving right now. We had a
Yes,
whole holiday in between.
we did. So I'll just do a very, very brief recap. Um, because yeah, it's been a very hard and very emotional week. And coming from somebody who does not navigate her emotions very well, it's been an even more challenging week. So, yeah, it's just been really hard. Our dog Gus, I'm gonna try and get through this without getting emotional.
That's
Our dog Gus, who I got 11 years ago in a trailer park in Caldwell, Idaho.
Do you know what's funny when you said that? I had a dog, Savannah, that I rescued tied from a tree to a trailer park when she
Oh
was a
my
pup.
gosh. Oh my gosh. Gus was being sold on Craigslist with some of his litter mates. The owner was trying to pass him off as a purebred border collie. I got there, him and he had, I think there were two other males left at the time. Uh, the owner was like, purebred border collie, blah, blah, blah. All of the dogs were covered in fleas and mange, were like malnourished. It was not a pretty picture. I was like, I can see mom and dad in the like they had him like fenced off, like up against the fence. They had like a little makeshift like pen for them. So I can literally see them right there. Like this is not a purebred border collie. And if you looked at Gus probably looked the most border collie, but if you looked at any of the other dogs, it was clearly not. And I was just like, no. And they wanted, I think, $300. And I remember saying, I actually wasn't going to buy a dog. I was going to like pet puppies. Like I wanted to just like pet some puppies. But then when I got there and saw just like how bad it was like, I was like, okay, I have to take at least one of these out of this situation. And so I remember talking to the gal and I was like, I'm gonna give you, and I like rummaged through my wallet and I think I had $50 in cash. I was like, I'm gonna give you $50 and it's so that you will give me the shot records because you told me that they were immunized. And she was like, no, $300. And I was like, $50 and I won't call animal control on you. And she went inside. She got me his shot records. She set him on the hood of her car. I grabbed him. I gave her the $50. I took Gus, put him in my truck. We left. I called animal control anyways.
Wow, just
So
ruthless. Heidi is ruthless. That's what we learned from that story.
that was the story of Gus. But anyways, he is like one of those like one of one dogs. Like I feel like you get one of those in your lifetime, and Gus was mine. And I hope to have another great dog one day, but it's just like there will never be another one like Gus. And he's had a really rough week. He's 11 years old. We've known for probably about 6 months that he's had a brain tumor, but we were managing his symptoms pretty well up until this point. He took a pretty gnarly turn on Sunday. Um, we thought we were in kind of the thick of having to say goodbye to him. And then all of a sudden he turned a corner and got a lot better. And then yesterday on Thanksgiving, he turned another corner and things weren't so great. And, we had already, back on Sunday, canceled our trip to go see family for Thanksgiving. So, like, I was really like happy that I could be here with Gus, and I'm really glad that like that all happened before we left and not like while we were gone. Um, and leaving him with like a dog sitter, like that would have just absolutely broken my heart. But um, Cal's first Thanksgiving didn't get to be like around all of our family, and that was really hard. And so Sam and I were just, trying to make the most out of a, crummy situation and make the most out of his first Thanksgiving and like first big holiday. But it was definitely not what we had planned. And then Gus had another kind of episode yesterday, but then is doing great today. So it's just kind of been this huge emotional roller coaster again, like just for somebody who does not navigate her emotions well, having such an emotional week was just really, really tough. And then like there was a time where like I put Cal down for a nap and Sam and I were just like laying with Gus and just like, a little bit beside ourselves of, what was going on. And, Cal cried and woke up from his nap. And I looked at Sam and I was just like, gosh, like, I just want to be here in this moment. And I have to like, pull myself together and go like smile and make silly faces at my 6-month-old baby who doesn't understand what's going on. And just like the dichotomy of all of that just felt so wild this week. So, anyways, that was our week in a nutshell. I'll leave out all the details, but yeah, it was rough. And so here we are, the day after Thanksgiving, recording an episode.
Well, I think because we kind of have chatted back and forth, and obviously we've all either been through this situation or like know someone who's been in this situation. And the bad part is like I told Heidi, like I've never, and maybe if any of you ever found it, like I'd never have the words to try to be there other than I told her like I've been there before and it sucks. And like going through that mental, emotional, like what do we do? When do we do it? That decision is always rough. On the lighter side, don't worry. Cal will not be upset about missing his first Thanksgiving. He won't
You
remember it
won't
at all.
remember it.
He won't remember it. You two had like, and that'll lead into some stuff that we talk about. But um, I think sometimes Lindsay and I laugh a lot about this, like expectations. You know what I mean? Like you had this X in your head, and kids will just have this way of turning it on, like pivot on the thing, and you're like, you know what? We do a lot of conversations where it's like where when things don't go the way you're supposed to, sometimes you want to get frustrated. And then sometimes she and I just have that conversation where it's like, um, was that like on us? Did we make this expectation just completely unreal? And now I'm upset or I'm not like in a good spot. But I don't want to say it's your fault, but you had this like,
Yeah.
and kids will do that to you all the time. You'll be like, we're going to watch a Christmas movie and it's going to be great. We're going to sit with a blanket together and, have this wonderful. And then your kid's like 10 minutes into it, like, nah, I'm not doing this. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you ruined everything. But like in reality, you're like, maybe I shouldn't have like built that up in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a big piece of what I wanted to talk about today too. So that's a good segue. But first, before I get ahead of myself and segue, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was really good. It was it's kind of ever evolving. I'm in that chapter of life where like my grandparents are not here anymore. And
Hmm.
then like Lindsay's grandma, great grandma, or no, her sorry. Lindsay's grandma
Hmm.
has moved into a nursing home down the street. So it kind of like morphs, and then like my grandma had passed away a couple of years ago. So like my parents came over to my in-laws' house, and like it just kind of turns into this nice, like interesting, just hodgepodge of people that come over and
Yeah.
visit and do stuff, which is it's not like traditionally what we do, but I think it's got its own kind of beauty because it's just like let's get together, have fun, have some
Yeah.
drinks, and just relax. Like I said before, you're trying to build up all this stuff in your head. Um, and if you just kind of let some things go and let your own expectations back up a little bit and just be present and enjoy it, it was a lot of fun. So I mean, the big part for me this week, for those of you who don't know, was getting my Christmas lights dialed in. because I have to leave next weekend. So that was my big accomplishment this week. The Thanksgiving was kind of secondary, but we
I
got
was
that
pretty
dialed
pumped.
in. Huh?
I was pretty pumped to see you got them done.
Yeah. I mean, I work on them. I'm one of those people that is a little bit obsessed with Christmas decorations. Lots of lights, going to music, and last year, I don't know if I've told you guys a story. There was this news article where they're like, we went around town and found the best Christmas lights, and there's like this app you can use, and they created it just for Boise. And I just on a whim saw it on news, and I was like, oh, I wonder. And I punched that there, and my house was on there, so I was super excited about that. So
That's very
I'm
cool.
kind of a big deal in case people
He's a
don't.
big deal. Yep.
But
Boise famous.
no, but yeah, I got all that done, and then it's been really nice because I got home from Madison, Wisconsin on Sunday, and then I just have kind of vegged out this week. If any of my coworkers are listening, big thanks for letting me have some time off and covering my you know what while I'm gone. Um, but gotta hang out Thanksgiving. Even this morning, it was too cold to get one member of our family to dress up like the kid from Christmas Story, but Quentin and I definitely made it and went to a Boise State football game. So we had a lot of fun, and
Huh,
it's just been a nice chill holiday, which I very much so enjoyed.
I love that. I'm glad you had a good holiday, and I am glad that Boise State performed for you guys today. And
I
yeah,
got
that sounds great.
I had kind of had to go. I'm gonna nerd out for a second for everybody. We have a really good Boise State running back, and I told Quentin, I was like, we have to go because this dude is just a stud, one of the best in the country. And I was like, we're never gonna probably get to see him again. And then this guy was probably not legally, mind you, and I probably shouldn't have um, bought it, but I bought Quentin a shirt that says the running back's first name and then an F bomb and his last name. And I was like, that's so beautiful. I love that. Here, he's like, can I have one, Dad? And I was like, yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, I'm so glad you had a good time and yeah, just got to spend holiday with family. I think like that's the thing that I miss the most. Like Sam and I were like reminiscing, and now that, we have Cal, we've talked a lot about like, you know, our traditions growing up and like what we want to like form going forward and like what that looks like. Um, and so like, we're really excited about all of that, but we're just like trying to, yeah, figure out kind of like what this is going to look like moving forward. And just in that, we were sharing like some of our favorite holiday like memories or like specific ones that stuck out. And it was like never the place, it was never like exactly what we did it that you remember. It was more like, yeah, like bringing people together. Um, and like one of my favorite memories is like we went to Priest Lake and rented this like teeny tiny little cabin where like we were all on top of each other. And like I remember my mom, we like brought stuff to make Thanksgiving dinner in this little cabin, and it was just me, my mom, my dad, my sister, and like we were playing board games, and my mom is trying to like carve this turkey on this cutting board that's like, 1 foot by 1 foot, and it's just like such a mess. And I'm sure, like, in that moment, I'm sure my mom was in her head about, like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or this isn't, whatever. But, like, as a kid, I look back on that as like one of my all-time favorite Thanksgivings. And I think that just like goes to your point of like, you can like plan and plan and plan and like have your idea or like this expectation of what something is going to be. And when it doesn't, like you get really disappointed or like you beat yourself up over it. But like the reality of what like what is received on the other end probably isn't even like what you think that it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very much so. It's always one of those like what the picture in your mind is and what actually happens are usually not quite the same. And the nice part in that is um sometimes like the expectation or what you didn't think was going to happen is going that ends up happening, and it's something different, but that doesn't mean it's any less successful or meaningful or impactful. It's just different. Like you said, your mom had probably had this wonderful expectation of all this stuff, and it went sideways. And but that's what made it probably more memorable, and that's probably what, like, you just having that mental image of her struggling, trying to cut on this board, which probably drove her nuts, is one of those memories that you'll keep forever. And she's like,
Yeah.
she's probably wishing I'm trying to forget that because that was
Yeah.
so frustrating. And you're like, no, that's what made the whole day, was just that fact.
Yeah, like I remember like it snowed, so like we were stuck and like we had like planned on doing all of these hikes that we like couldn't do because it snowed and the trails weren't safe, and like the cabin was way smaller than what they thought, and like all of these different things, like looking back as an adult I can be like, oh, that was probably like so frustrating, but like we were literally just like all stuck in this, you know, teeny tiny little cabin together playing board games and, you know, eating poorly carved turkey
Poorly carved chunks of turkey.
uh and it's just like the best. But I think that is a good segue into like our ultimate topic for today. I just wanted to talk to Tyler about, because like we haven't really gotten to talk about it, and I am fresh into the parenting world. And while like Sam and I always like we keep talking about like, you know, when real parenting starts, right? Like, yes, we are parents and we are parenting this child and we're making choices, right? Like Tyler and I before we started recording, we were even talking like about sleep training, right? Like that's a parenting choice, whether you do that or not, or how you do that, or, you know, whatever. But like I almost view like true parenting in like, you know, guiding little humans to like make good decisions, right? Like that in my brain is like good, or that in my brain is like true parenting, right? Like teaching them right from wrong, making, you know, good decisions, helping like shape them as little humans. And like I think Sam and I are kind of in the like keep a baby alive and happy stage of
Just
parenting. And so like, but even in that, like being a parent in whatever level of parenting you're doing at the time, I think like shapes not only just how you show up in life and in the world, but I think really shapes like how you show up in your job, and how you lead differently. And so I just wanted to have that conversation with Tyler as a seasoned veteran parent to a newbie parent, and kind of like what nuggets maybe I've taken away already, but like also what nuggets I have to look forward to in like how it shapes how you show up in your job, in leadership, or just like as a person. And so whether you are a parent already and can relate to, you know, a lot of what we're talking about here or not, I still think there are going to be some good nuggets about just like, I don't know, a different perspective, I guess, because well, maybe some of this I wouldn't have like fully understood until I experienced it firsthand. I still think if somebody would have told me some of these things, I would have had a different perspective going into it. So, anyways, that's my little segue. I'm really excited to hear if you could pick like your top three or four things of like how either being or becoming a parent has shaped how you show up either in life or in your job. What might that look like?
yeah, and I think, oh, this might come across the bow for some people. Even being a parent or your job, if you do it right, that's probably gonna fire some people up. But if you, this is my honest belief, if you do it right, it changes who you are as a person. Because if you really honestly take a look at yourself in all these situations, like, it's an opportunity to grow and to understand a lot more about other individuals, whether it's your coworkers, about your kids. I mean, I only have one, but I've talked to numerous people, and I've heard over and over again, like, my kids are not the same person. Like, you can't attack problems with two kids in the same way.
Right?
or even in leadership, like it just allows you, it almost sometimes gives you a mirror that you're looking at. And if you're really good at it, you can start to pick apart things that you don't do well, but you need to change. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned that transitions through everything, um, is you can have a plan, like you can map out everything, and then from the famous words of, we won't talk about the fight because I watched it, it was horrible, but Mike Tyson, like
Oh,
everyone has a plan until you get hit in the face.
yeah.
In the minutes like adversity comes, whether it's in work, your family relationship, or your kids, you really have to pivot, and you have to understand that the fundamentals of the plan can stay somewhat consistent, but if you're too rigid, it causes too many problems, and you have to learn to open up your ideals, to open up just what the situation, ask a lot of questions, and really just look at yourself and be like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. How can we get some of that still accomplished? And look at
Hmm.
yourself and be like, what can I control? And how can I help people? Or how can I, like, you almost have to get a lot of empathy and flip it backwards and be like, okay, why did it, like, what was this person thinking? What was my child thinking? Like, what was, this coworker thinking? And how did I miscommunicate? My big thing to everyone is, I only can control what I say, like my message. And so I want to be as clear about that, as honest about that, and empathetic as I possibly can. And when things go wrong, I always look to myself first. That doesn't mean like if Heidi and I have a disagreement, we're probably both at fault a little bit,
Hmm.
but I need to take ownership in all that. Because if I don't, like, and I think a lot of that is it's a new style of parenting for a lot of people. It's a new style of leadership and growth to be like, I'm not always right just because I'm the adult or I'm the
Hmm.
leader in the group or I'm you know what I mean, the owner of the company, whatever. Like that doesn't mean I'm always right. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I just have to look at maybe what I did wrong and then pivot and go from there.
Yeah. Uh, did you read that book, Extreme Ownership?
I did.
Yeah. It goes into that, but I think you know, also reflected within that is like parenting, right? I think it's easy to translate that message to like the business world, the leadership world, um, or what have you, right? But I think transitioning that message into parenting can be harder when you're like way, way, way more emotionally invested.
Mhm.
And like what that allows you to yet take some fault and apologize even, or show up differently or better because you didn't like how you showed up in that particular moment, right? Instead of doubling down,
Oh,
right?
that right there, what you said, sorry to interrupt. Top three things that have made me a better person, parent, and leader is the ability to say I messed up or I effed up, and that's my fault, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Even
I
like
mean,
with
that's,
even with my son, even with an 8-year-old, the amount of like de-escalation when I know I messed up and I can just say like, you know what, buddy, I shouldn't have yelled, I shouldn't have got upset. That's my fault, and I take ownership in that
yeah.
because so many people are afraid to do that.
Yeah. It's I think some people maybe, and again, this is where I'm taking little nuggets from everybody else in a way, because I'm not in that stage of parenting yet. But there are times where I've even apologized to Cal and he can't understand anything. You know what I mean? Oh, I should have done this differently or whatever. But I think that ability to not double down in an effort to maintain some image, right?
Yeah.
I think as parents, sometimes we want to be perceived as either the authoritarian isn't necessarily the right word that I'm looking for, but this person who has all of the answers. And like, I think if we approach it from more of a place of like authenticity and coming to the table really honestly, of like, you know, like this is the role that I played in this situation that maybe isn't going so well or whatever. Like, how can we as a team, right, like come together and um, both show up better, right, in that scenario? Kid and parent, or colleague and colleague, or, boss and colleague, whatever, right? Like, I think that open line of communication is just so huge. Um, so anyways, I 100% wholeheartedly agree with that. And again, I think that's going to come in even more so when like the quote unquote real parenting starts for me.
Well, and I think one thing you talked about is when you're doubling down and you won't admit fault, most times, and I don't, even as a parent or leader or whatever, you're protecting your own ego. You're like a little bit like, I can't admit that. And on the flip side, I mean, especially with in leadership with your colleagues, with your spouse, and even with your kids, the chance and the ability to say that creates such a real feel to you as like, no, like we all kind of grew up, um, or at least I did. I don't want to speak for you. It was like your parents were almost superhuman. Like you never thought they did anything wrong. They were like these perfect people that
Yeah.
even when they did do something wrong, they would like kind of not admit to it. So you're like, oh, but when you can knock down that barrier, especially for people in my generation, you open a door to, I mean, when you have these parents, sorry, mom and dad, if you're listening, who have a hard time saying, like, yeah, I messed that up, and they're so perfect, you don't want to have conversations where you're admitting your imperfections. That's the same thing with a coworker. If I can guarantee you, if any of them are listening, they'll have 100 stories. I'll walk in and say, "Yep, I messed that up. I didn't do that right. Like I
Yeah.
probably should have done this and this." And I do it with my son. I do it with everyone because I want them to know, like, I accept you and I love you. And this goes for everyone, like family, friends, coworkers. Like I genuinely love you, and you make mistakes and I make mistakes, but that doesn't mean that we can't still work through everything and find a new direction. And that's where I know I follow some people on social media that were kind of my age, where I don't consider myself a millennial, but it was kind of like that weird phase. But
Yeah.
where you just grew up with, you're not supposed to have emotions, and the ability to knock those down with lots of different people creates a deeper connection and a deeper way. And even the more difficult conversations are so much easier when you share that genuine ground between each other.
Yeah. I agree. And I think honestly that's something that like I have to like actively work on doing. Like that, I think the ability to say, like, once I recognize that I made a mistake, and like, once like I have that realization of like, oh shit, like there's like a big part of me that like played a very big role in whatever is wrong in this scenario. Once I have that realization, like I think apologizing and like trying to figure out how, to right the ship essentially, that piece comes naturally. But sometimes, like, not that it's hard for me to recognize my own faults, because I do think I am sometimes like my own worst critic, but like sometimes it is challenging for me when like, when I do think I'm in the right? Like, and I to not have like a right party and a wrong party, like to
Right.
just have like, okay, there was some miscommunication here, or like this was my part in this, and maybe you had a part or you didn't have a part. Like to get away from like I'm right, and like letting go of that and being more on the like, where is the disconnect,
Sure.
takes work for me to get from that perspective to where is the disconnect. Like I have to actively put myself there. It's not something that is just like something goes wrong, oh, where's the disconnect, right? Like my guttural instinct is like almost like protective, right? It's that like protecting your ego kind of a thing. That is like the gut, like initial reaction. And I have to work to take the next step of like seeking to understand versus seeking to be right.
Right. Well, and
And
I
like
think, oh,
that
go
that
ahead.
takes an active effort from me.
I think one thing that helped me with that when dealing with, and I mean, some of it is things that I've read, is experiences in the workplace, is I try to, as much as I possibly can, like throw myself in that other person's shoes and start to like look at it from their position and like just try to be like, okay, if I am Heidi, this is what I'm looking at, this is what I'm thinking. How did that not, like, where did that disconnect? You know what I mean? How is this being perceived? Because sometimes, especially when you're in a leadership position, you're thinking at a 10,000-foot view. And I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you the people that are lower down are not seeing those same decisions or that information. And this is something from that extreme ownership that I think most people do poorly is lead up and lead down.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm a assistant athletic trainer for me and I'm frustrated about something, the first thing I want them to say, like, first thing I try to tell them is like, what information do I or do your associates and whoever like above you, what information do they not have that they need to know so you feel like you're being heard?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're frustrated and I don't know that information, I can't help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
But from the other spot, you have to be open, honest, and communicate frequently so that way they understand every step as much as they can. Because trust me, I've been, we've all been blindsided by something where you're like, where, what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but even when those things pop up, the sooner you can be like, hey, let's talk because I want you to know my thought process. And if you're honest and you walk through that with people, even with like, we talk a lot about with our son, like the more you can get ahead of that information, if there's something that is on the agenda that might cause him stress or anxiety, the more we get ahead of it early and talk to him about it, the more he has time to come with you with questions to present different points of view that like maybe you were tractor beamed into where you're going. You're like, I didn't even think about that. That's a great conversation. Let's sit and talk about that so I can find a way so I can understand where you're coming from and we can find a seat at the table that may or may not always change the conversation. But I always tell people the last thing I ever want to tell anyone is like, is the tough shit answer. Like it happens sometimes, but usually there's a compromise in there somewhere on some level that at least gives people a voice, whether it's like your kids, it's like the analogy or the joke where you want your kids to eat fruits and vegetables and you say, I have fresh cut strawberries for you, or I have carrots. You get to pick which one you want. Like
Yeah.
you're still getting what you want as the person up there, but they have some choice and
Some
some ability,
autonomy.
some autonomy. And I think we don't do that as business people either. We're just like, no, I this is what I want to do. And you're like, okay, well, there's probably a compromise somewhere in there where you could say, like, hey, I want to head in this direction, but if I'm hearing you correctly, your concerns are this and this. How about if we find this little medium ground so we're still headed here, but it's allowing you to be more bought in and to have more honest conversations with me. And like ultimately that gets the ball rolling.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that. I think, like I said, it's something that like I have to actively like put myself there with like instead of it just like going off of however I feel, right? Like I have to like take a beat and like make a very concerted effort to like go to that place. And that's something that like I'm still working on. Um, but like, yeah, I think that translates in terms of like how that like can help me as a parent moving forward. But I think is also really helpful to like put yourself in those shoes or in that scenario, like as a leader or in your role in life or, in your job or, whatever it might be. I really like that. Um, I think my biggest one, I really only have one. I have a lot, but like I think it all kind of ties back to this one, and we touched on it already a little bit, and it's like expectation management.
Sure.
Uh, I am somebody who always, like, if I had an expectation of myself, like, I could go do that thing. And as long as I, like, put in the correct amount of effort and had the correct information, right, like, I could create the correct outcome, right? Boom, boom, bang, always, right? No matter what it was. Like, that is just the way that it went. And being a parent has like fully and completely rocked my world in that scenario. Um, because there's so much that's like out of our control. And then like I got to a place where, thank you, postpartum anxiety. I really tried to control like every little element. And when things still went awry, then I was like, I'm failing, or like my anxiety would spiral and I would think like something is wrong, like something big is wrong because it's not going how I want it to, despite all of my best efforts and inputs, right? But like babies are complex and
Yeah.
like they could, you know, have a tag that's tickling them on the inside of their jammies that is just pissing them off particularly well this evening, right? Like, who knows? There's so many inputs that like we can't fully control. And I have come to realize that like my biggest meltdowns, again, thank you, postpartum anxiety. There's so much of this that's like hormonally driven, but like there are multiple times in early motherhood for me where I looked at Sam and I said, like, I do not like how I am like showing up or like how I am feeling about this. Like, this does not feel like me. Like, I feel like out of control. Right. And like,
Yeah.
while part of that is like hormonal, there was another part that was not. And it was just my expectations of the situation and feeling so either let down or frustrated or anxious or scared or whatever, that like it did not go how I intended it to go. And when it didn't, I then had a really hard time pivoting out of anxiety, panic, whatever, into like, we're just going to handle it, right? And
Right.
just like move forward, right? And we can pick apart like maybe why that happened and we can try something different next time. But like I would get stuck and like perseverate in like, why didn't this go just right? Why is, this a challenge? Why is this, hard? What, like, and I would beat myself up over it. And if I look back on some of those like hardest moments, again, while some of that was hormonally driven, probably 50% of it was truly just expectation management. My expectation of how something was going to go was here, and how it went was all the way down here. And
Hard right.
yeah, and there's a huge gap between those that I could not wrap my brain around, because it was like, you know, I'm not half-assing this whole motherhood thing, right? Like I'm putting my all into it. Why isn't it going, this picture perfect way that I like anticipated? Or not even that I anticipated motherhood to be picture perfect, but like even little things, like little outcomes of different things, right? Whether that's a nap or a wake window or a feeding or whatever, right? Like you could break it down microscopically throughout the day. And it's like, if things weren't going the way I had expected them to or anticipated them to, because I put in all of this research and all of my best efforts to get this particular outcome and it didn't happen, I had a really hard time pivoting out of that into like rolling with it. And I think part of that was learning to let go of some of those expectations and just like yes, you can put in your best effort and you can, you know, make a plan, right? But like if it doesn't go to plan, instead of feeling stuck in that space of why didn't it go this way? Like I'm a failure, this, you know, blah, 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 blah. And like this kind of negative spiral, being able to just like roll with it and handle it in the moment. And then maybe go back and be like, you know, this is what we can change for next time and see if that makes a difference or not, right? Like, and you know, we literally did this twice this week, right? Like of, oh, you know, maybe Cal's last wake window was a little bit too long and that's why, you know, him going to bed was such a challenge or, you know, whatever. And then like last night we nailed it and we are like, oh, that must have been it because we shortened that last wake window. That must have been it. And then tonight was a disaster. So it's like, you never know, right? Like, uh, but like that is something that even like a month ago or like really like 2 or 3 months ago, if the night would have gone how it went tonight 3 months ago, I would have been a wreck and we probably wouldn't have been recording this podcast. But again, I think a lot of that is anxiety that is much better managed now. But like, I think that has been probably my biggest takeaway. And like that also translating into how I've been showing up for work in motherhood, right? Like because I'm balancing both. That was something that I really struggled with, like announcing that like I'm back because I didn't really like feel ready to be back in case something went wrong or in case we went through another really hard chapter or whatever. But like it took me a really long time to just like allow myself to let things be imperfect. Like
Sure.
if bedtime doesn't go perfectly, it's going to be okay, right? Like
Yes.
if you know, and we're going to be able to handle it, right? Like we're going to deal with it as it
Right.
comes. And I think that's the biggest thing. And same thing like in work, right? We have these expectations, and if they don't go according to plan, like instead of just sitting there and spiraling about how things aren't going the way you want them to go, or you didn't get the promotion that you wanted, or you've been posting on social media for, you know, X number of months and, you know, your following isn't growing, or you haven't had a video go viral, or you haven't like, you know, all these different things. Like we can sit and we can perseverate in why we're such a failure, or we can just like handle things as they come, right? Like,
Right.
and move forward because you have, like, Sam is good at reminding me of like, if we have the skills and the tools to be able to like navigate it, then we can just navigate it, right? Like,
Right.
and take it as it comes. And I think that goes into like business as well, right? Like, if we can just navigate things as they come instead of, I think that's when things typically fall apart for people, especially in those early months, years, right? Like we want things to go a certain way. We see other people having like instant success or whatever that might be. And when that doesn't happen for us or for, you know, whatever reason, I think that's where a lot of people end up quitting, right? Motherhood isn't something that you can just quit, right? So you have to
Well,
push
most people
through.
can't. I mean,
Uh,
it's not
yeah,
something I would promote, obviously.
yes. Yes. I'm not gonna pack a bag and skedaddle anytime soon, but um like I think that's where a lot of people end up quitting in either business ownership, or they take a role where they feel over their head, or, you know, whatever it might be. We get to this point where like we have these expectations of how things should have gone. And when they don't go that way, we blame ourselves and we're like, oh, I'm a failure. Things, you know, this isn't for me. Or, you know, we end up spiraling. What a disaster. How horrible, blah, blah, blah. And then we quit, right?
Mhm.
And we let like the dream dies there. And I think that's one piece that has helped me from business in motherhood, but also like on the flip side, I think has allowed me to like speak to individuals who are starting a business specifically of like, not that like you're not allowed to quit, right? Because you're allowed to like pivot. But if you really truly looked at your business as like a non-negotiable, like of walking away or not walking away, right? Like I think you look at it with a different perspective of like, okay, how do we continue? How do we continue when things are really, really freaking hard, right?
Yeah.
Like when you don't want to show up, when the input is not matching the output that you want, like how do you continue to show up in spite of all of that? Um, and I think that is the biggest lesson that I've learned, but like, and it's been on full display in motherhood, but I think can also translate over into the business world in terms of just like managing your expectations of how things are going to go and allowing yourself to navigate them as they come while still being like willing to not necessarily like dissect, but like be curious about why maybe something went the way that it went.
Yeah, I think I don't want to laugh, but I think sometimes that's one of the the nice part about some of the things that you went through, or the idea of like expectations, is usually, and I can almost promise you this, and at least in the reference that I will give, like your expectations as far as like how the event's going to look, how the day should unfold, like, how, the family get together is supposed to be, like, in your head. The positive and the negative of that is like it's up to you to define those expectations. And when things don't go that way, the beauty in that is no one else knows except for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even if you have Cal and he is being a shit and he's doing stuff, everyone else like kind of expects that as a parent. Like, especially if you've gone through it, it's like those people who have never had a kid, when you're on a plane and there's a screaming child that just will not, and you can see those people that are kind of like annoyed and kind of irritated, and everyone that's had a kid is like, don't you worry about it at all, I've been there, I've done that, and I'm with you 100%. And like, you have this shared camaraderie where the expectations or things are not going to go that way, and that's okay. And like, everyone's kind of laughing and you're falling apart inside because things aren't going the way you want, but it's like no one else is paying attention to that. Like, that is something where you said you're managing it in your head, which is good and bad, because like, I don't would never go somewhere and be like, well, I think it should go XYZ. When I go somewhere, it's just the way it is. But I mean, I'm in a profession where I'm coming to, like, I've learned a long time ago, I don't always manage it the way I should, but being flexible and knowing things are not going to go the way they're planned, or just the expectation I have every day. Like, I can write shit on a piece of paper and stick it there, and it's not going to go anywhere near, because the minute Susie comes in my office and something's wrong, I take a hard pivot and like I got to like throw everything out the door, which is not that uncommon from like parenting, where you're like, okay, I have this plan, and then he didn't sleep for a nap, and then like, oh shit, like, um, and I think sometimes what I've learned in those situations, even at work, um, I use sarcasm and humor a lot to deflect when things go bad. Like, I like to make jokes, like, just, oh shit, like we have this little like damn it doll where you like smack it against, like, we'll joke and throw it across the room, and like, understanding that you can kind of laugh a little bit at yourself and about the expectations, and then have a real conversation with when things don't go like I just trying hard not to laugh when you guys were saying like, well, Cal's wake window was probably a little too late, and then if we switch this, and I'm just smiling because I was like, it sounds like a great theory, but kids just don't fit in that formula most of the time. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
you're trying to gather this evidence, and sometimes like 1 + 1 = 2, and sometimes 1 + 1 somehow equals 9. And I don't know
Yeah.
how we got there, but
Oh yeah.
there's a lot
That's
of, like, you just, as you get older, you start to embrace and like the beauty of the imperfection of it. And like,
Mhm.
and I know you and Sam are wonderful, amazing humans who can navigate anything. You're just you're first time parents that are
Oh,
just
yeah.
like wanting this all mapped out, especially you, where you like try to, map out everything. And sometimes you just gotta laugh and say, like, well, we can like, but he is very true in the fact where you can say, like, we can do this, like we can navigate this together, like
Mhm.
figure it out. Like it's not gonna be perfect. And living with someone who is an OCD kind of like perfectionist type person, it's a hard lesson to learn over a while. Like you can want that, um, but kids just have this way of making it not that way, and it's not much different than when you're working with people and you're trying to fit two different personalities together, and you communicate, and sometimes things go really well, and sometimes they don't. But I think as long as you share that common ground and you have those characteristics where you'll figure it out, you just kind of have to ride those waves out a lot of times.
Yeah.
Uh,
That was one thing we were saying we were very grateful for yesterday, not to get sappy, but like just grateful to like, have a partner to like ride it out when it is a mess with.
well, and I think to a certain extent, not to that extent, but I think, and I don't even know the full extent of it, but I think the three of us have done that a lot with this business where we're riding out and trying new things. And okay, we're going to pivot here, we're going to pivot there. And you're all like in the ship together.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a mess, and sometimes you're yelling at each other and you can't figure it out. But it's like, you can't leave the ship. We're in the ship together.
We're in the ship.
We're in
Yep.
the ship and we're going to do this. But I mean, man, if you guys, and I'm sure she'll get into it, knew the amount of times from, and this isn't even when I started, but like I started earlier than most. Heidi and I have pivoted different directions, tried different things, pivoted, and like just kept going. The ship may have been pointing one direction and turned around and pointed, 90 degrees, 180 degrees in the other direction, but it was still moving. And it's like perfection can sometimes, and usually is always, inhibits like progress because you're trying to be like absolute dialed in, like I know this will work. And then when it doesn't, like what's that thing we say, you got to fail 11 times to find your avenue. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we do that as parents, we do that as people. We want this nice neat outlined path, and it's just not. And it's like we used to tell people in fitness, um, the analogy of the story with the kid with the horse that's trying to get through the woods, where he wants a path, he wants to be able to see the end path, and talks to the horse, and he's like, we can't make it through this forest, I can't see a way out. And the horse just says, well, can you see your next step? He says, yeah. And he's like, maybe that's all we need to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
that, with your kids, that's with your coworkers, like it's not going to be perfect, just find the next step. What do we got to do? And let's find the tools and the resources and just chip away
Take the
at it.
next. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Well, I want to do something fun to like close out our episodes. And if Tyler alluded to all of our pivots that we've done, if you think back to 2 podcasts ago, we had a podcast called 2% Better. And we talked about like we
Two
don't have to do
seasons or 2 episodes? Because our
what?
last one was called How to Health. Before How to Health, we had, so you're talking
2 podcasts ago.
2 podcasts ago. Got it.
Yeah. So anyways, we always talked about like something that like a goal for the week. I'd like to kind of take that theme and like expand on it a little bit and just share like what is something that like you are actively working on, and it doesn't have to be something super concrete or whatever, but I'd like to just kind of like share something that we are also working on growing in, or whatever, and have some like loose check-ins on like how that is how that's going over the course of episodes, and if it changes or pivots, or if our goals, shift and change over the course of this. I think that'll be, I mean, just a testament to, again, like how, like, where your what's the quote? Where your focus, where your energy goes, your focus grows. No, I'm butchering it. Anyways, what's something that you're working on that you'd like to share?
Sure. And I have one that is very top of mind, and there have been, I think, between all the different things, the accident, my coaching changes, like all these different facets in my life, there's been this growing theme in me where, and I'm trying to think of the best way to frame this. I feel like it's always on me to get things done. And there is a growing frustration that I want people to help. I give a mouthful to my insurance agent because he doesn't get things done at the speed I want him to get things done,
Mm-hmm.
which when I work in athletics is ridiculous. And but it feels like when you're rowing the boat and everyone is in the back kind of talking and going through stuff and like not helping you row the boat, you feel this sense of like, if something's got to get done, I'm the person that has to do it.
Yeah, the
And
fixer.
I'm the rower. Like I just got to keep rowing and I'm going to row. And like, I've been working on how to change my frame of mind because I feel like I'm rowing this big ship and I keep getting these little boats that are like clamping on and I'm rowing more and more people and the weight of just being able to do it sometimes just seems like it doesn't. I never would, but there are times where you just want to like throw the O's in the ocean and be like, F this, I'm done. Like I'm tired of doing everything for the like you just feel like you are the person rowing for all these people and getting stuff done. So it's trying to tie off some of those loose ends, trying to cut some of those boats, cut your losses, but also not be afraid to like ask for help, which I did do a little bit this week. Like I did kind of bail, not bail. We were going to do some inventory stuff, and I was like, I just told my coworkers like, I've had one day off since August. Like I got to take this week because I'm exhausted. Like I
Yeah.
need to stop rowing for a while. So that's something that I'm working on. I don't necessarily know, especially with this new season, new coaches, like it's going to get infinitely better, but I got to find ways to like get a
Make it
little bit better.
incrementally
Yeah.
better.
Get some more people paddling with me just to take the load off so you don't feel like you're doing all the work yourself.
Can I turn a mirror back onto you for a second from something you said earlier today?
Sure.
You said earlier today about like frustrations that build up from either people above you or below you or whatever. But if you don't have the information to help them, how are you expected to help them? Do all of the people in all of the little boats or in your boat know or have the information that they need in order to start rowing?
Not all. The insurance companies definitely have the information because
That's
I give
that's
that to
frustrating.
them and I have to
But like, would some of the boats benefit, or would your load lighten if you were able to explain or tell them or give them more information so that they can say like, oh shit, yeah, I should probably start rowing this boat.
well,
Um,
yeah, for sure. And I think
and
the
it's annoying that you have to ask or tell or whatever.
right,
Like
no, you're
they
right.
should just
Yeah.
look around and be like, man, I'm coasting. I don't need to row. This is great. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's again like managed expectations of like our expectations of how we feel like things should go, and why don't they open their freaking eyeballs and see that this boat needs rowing? Like, why do I
Yeah.
have to tell or ask, to get the boat to be rowed? But at some point, like, again, that's your expectation, not theirs.
Right. Well, and yes, and the one thing that, and I will, this is something we can talk about over the course that I'm really bad at is I will avoid it sometimes if I think it's going to bring around conflict.
Mm.
Because sometimes, and I am 99% of the time very professional in my demeanor with how I handle colleagues, workers, probably, it even with like my wife and my son, I try to never let emotion take over everything because when you work in a collegiate setting, I'm gonna take another shot across the bow. I don't care what anyone says. Being passionate and acting like a 2-year-old on a sideline or as a coach are inexcusable, and I have no excuse for those. Like
Mhm.
we're adults, we got to manage our expectations and emotions.
Yeah.
That's what being an adult is, and if you can't do that, you probably should see some counselors and get some stuff worked out because everyone gets frustrated, but you still like I always believe you have to be a professional. And even if you're upset, like let's talk about it. Let's not get pissed. But I will avoid some of those, but I'm getting better specifically in the workplace at being just honest with people.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I understand what you're saying. And then trying to set more boundaries as far as I know what you have to accomplish and I understand and respect that. But I do have my limitations as far as what can be asked of me. And so I need you to understand and respect those in case, you know, I have to tell you no. I never want to be the person to tell you no, but sometimes that is the only choice you've given me, and we'll just have to work through it.
Yeah. I I like that. I'm excited to continue to check in on you on that one and see how your boat rowing is going.
The other hard part in that too, though, is, and this is expectations, is trying to understand, and we'll get into this at a different point, understanding and respecting who people are
Mm.
and what skills they have and don't have and what they can develop and what is the core of the person and try to be less frustrated with the core of the person and try to adapt them with skills
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes like just and I'm sure you guys can all think of this, hopefully it's not your spouse or your child, like fundamentally you are just different people
Mm-hmm.
and the way you create decisions and think about things and do things doesn't always mesh and sometimes that's difficult because you're like I want you to do it the way I think about it instead of
Yeah.
and that's why you try to give them skills like like honesty, feedback, emotional intelligence. Like you need to try to get each other to understand so that way it's more of a shared decision.
We should do a whole episode on different like either personality tests like Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, human design, like whatever, all of those different things and like pick it apart because truthfully, it's like the Enneagram blew the doors wide open for me on that because I was such a like if you don't do it how I do it, you're doing it wrong kind of a person, especially like late college. Like I I've always been not confrontational, but like I would never shy away from confrontation. But like that perspective for me, I think brought about more confrontation than probably even needed to happen because like was shit not going well? Sure. Was somebody doing something not to the best of their abilities and that was frustrating for me? Sure. But I think some of that too, just like in communication, like has helped me see that just like people process things differently. They approach things differently. They have, different strengths and weaknesses, and just like allowing people to operate within their strengths instead of trying to force my strengths to be somebody else's strengths,
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
We should do a whole episode dissecting that because like that was truly, I hate to say like transformational, but it really was for me
No,
to
I
just
would love
like
to do that. That sounds like fun.
better understand other people, like better understand myself, yes, but like also other people. It's been really cool. Anyways, I love that. We're
And
gonna
what
check in
is
on those boats periodically.
got it? What is yours?
I think I've already talked about it a little bit, but I am still just like kind of trying really hard to work on rolling with things, right? Like I've never tried to like put Cal on a schedule or, anything like that. Like I do roll with things in that way, but I have noticed that even though things have gotten a lot better and like my anxiety is much better managed and I don't feel myself like spiraling when things don't go well, um, I still struggle when like things don't go well. I can still feel it like weighing like heavily on the rest of the day almost.
Mhm.
Like the silliest little example from today, even. It's like Cal is just starting solids, right? Like just starting. And like, I've seen other kids or babies or whatever who start solids and they're just like so excited and like everything goes in their mouth and they love to eat and they're like, oh my gosh, this is delicious. Yum, 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 yum. And like Cal has a really high palate. He had to have 5 ties released when he was 7 weeks old. He is going to have feeding issues. Like, we just know this, right? And like, you know, we've only been giving him solids for a week, I think, 6 days, something like that. And again, like my expectations of how this was going to go were really high, and then they weren't. And I'm like trying to wrap my mind around, like, okay, this is going to look a little bit different. Like, we're navigating some of these challenges. That's going to be okay. And he just like doesn't have a ton of like excitement or interest around it. Like, he's still like putting the spoon in his mouth and all of this stuff. But like today, a little piece of rogue potato just hit a little bit wrong and he gagged so hard that he threw up a bunch of milk. And like I was like, oh great. And then like I was like, okay, well that sucks. This was a fail. And I'm like cleaning all of this up. And then like I can feel that like weighing into other parts of my day where like I look at Sam and how he like navigates that situation. And he was like, oh my gosh, buddy, wasn't that so fun? And I'm just like, does an ounce of anxiety not flow through your body whatsoever?
Well,
But
the good
anyways,
news is if he's very disinterested right now, you're going to be way set up when he's a teenager because they're disinterested in anything you do at any point.
and it's like not necessarily disinterest. It's like I don't even know how to describe it. I just
Or lack of
expected it.
enthusiasm, also something teenagers very much so.
I
Anything
think
that
it's
involves
just
you and them, no.
I think it's just uncomfortable for him right now because he has such a strong gag reflex. So it's like not super fun, right? He's
Oh
like, what
no, it
is
probably
this in
isn't.
my mouth? Like, he's like, get me back on that boob, man. And he's like, this sucks.
And in reality, if he could talk after he threw up and Sam's like, wasn't that fun? He's probably like, no, Dad, that wasn't fun. I just threw up all my milk, Dad. At what point was that fun, Dad?
Yeah. But like in my brain, right? Like I even said this out loud. Uh, I was like, well, that entire thing was counterproductive, right? Like he probably got a teaspoon of applesauce and mashed potatoes in his mouth and threw up 2 tablespoons. And so that was like wholly counterproductive. But Sam was like, no, like, and he's really good at like bringing me back down to earth. And I think, again, like, while I have gotten a lot better about like allowing myself to roll with things and taking things as they come and like problem solving while we're in it instead of like spiraling about it. Uh, I can still feel it even once I've addressed the solution. We've like collected ourselves and we're moving forward, that it is just like leaking into other parts of my day, or like it's still taking me a while to like get over or through the fact that it didn't go to plan.
Yeah.
And so that is what I am working on.
Yeah, well, that's good. And I mean, we'll continue to work on that. Like only for the next, I don't know, 20 years. Because
30
that'll just
years.
30, yeah, it'll just keep happening.
I'm sure my parents are still frustrated that things are not going to plan
Exactly.
how they
I mean,
planned
never
it to
change.
go.
Well, we can control our reactions as to how that changed. So,
And that's the biggest thing for me is like, I think, and then what was like the hardest for me was like my reaction was disproportionate to like what was happening. Again, thank you, anxiety. But like, um, while that has gotten a lot better and my reaction has gotten a lot better, it still just like leaks into other parts of the day. And I need to just like box it up, let it be what it was, and move forward.
yeah, it's not out yet. There's a book coming out that I'm going to buy and send to you that'll help you with that. So,
Okay, deal. Love it. Okay. Uh, shout out the boats, shout out
the
the box, and
box.
we'll check in on the boats in the box. I hope that this conversation was helpful, insightful. I hope you could relate. If you have, your own parenting advice or things, lessons that have made you a better human, better coworker, better leader. We'd love to hear them. Yeah.
Yeah, great episode today. I was excited.
Yeah. Go team. Okay. Everybody take care, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.